SEC breakdowns with the newcomers to the conference, starting with Texas. This Longhorns class ranks 5th nationally with 21 commits. 4 of those are 5 stars. And there's a lot of momentum around this program. They moved up a spot in the rankings on Monday after flipping safety Xavier Filsaime from Florida. But the big news today is our Carl Reed is reporting that wide receiver Ryan Wingo will sign his letter of intent to Texas, and that paperwork will be in shortly. So we're going to touch on the number 4 receiver in the country signing with the Longhorns first. And also, I apologize, Smoke. I did not introduce you. Smoke Dixon appearing on our set for the first time today. And Huff's still here with me. Huff, Ryan Wingo. This was a commitment or recruitment process with many turns. But at the end of the day, he ends up in Austin. What are the Longhorns getting in him?
Well, they're getting one of the most big physical receivers in the country. This is such a loaded receiver class. We talked about that earlier in the show, about how good this receiver class is. And you look at what he's got, what he possesses. He's got this big physical nature. Now, I'm not going to compare him to Roy Williams or Lima Sweet, some old school Texas big receivers that they had during the Mack Brown era. But you look at some of the speedier, smaller slot guys, the shiftier guys that Texas now has. This is a different type of receiver than what they've got. He's a big physical runner. He can get separation. He can get off of any kind of press coverage, but then he can run. He can get up the field, and he's got that ability to get in the open field, and he's gone. He was originally kind of pegged to go to Missouri. I think most people thought he was going to end up in Missouri, and then he announced for Texas, and is a huge win for Steve Sarkisian, because not only did he commit to Texas in the spring or in the fall when it looked like he was going to Missouri, but then they were able to hold on. It sounded like there was going to be all kinds of drama there down the stretch. So now that Texas knows that he's in the fold, that he's coming in, they're getting a top 5 receiver who's a top 12 player nationally. Again, speaks to the talent in this receiver class, but it speaks to the kind of receiver that he is. That big physical receiver is going to help Texas when they make that transition to the SEC with a target like Ryan Wingo, with his ability to get yards after contact and to be able to pick up and churn out extra yards after he catches the ball is going to be huge for that Texas offense.
Well, you know, in the SEC, what you got to get ready for is physical ball and strap glue-like coverage. And when you have glue-like coverage, there's a couple of ways you're going to separate. You're going to separate with burst out of the cut, or you separate with strength and size. And what this guy shows you, he's like a Juju Smith-Schuster. We just talked about it. He's a strong guy at the point of contact that can make big-time catches and run through little guys that want to tackle him. So he's going to pick up a lot of his yards after contact by just being a strong, physical guy. I like this matchup, what they got going on, just getting ready for SEC ball. They're getting ready to play physical, strap coverage, in tight coverage, tight window throw catches. I like this guy.
Yeah, that physicality important. Our Greg Biggins, when he was giving out superlatives, called him the big dog. I mean, over 200 pounds, comes from a running back family, all good stuff. All right, a lot of excitement around this Texas 2024 recruiting class. Our Hank South of Horns 24/7 has more.
I think some of my biggest storylines are, how high can this Texas class finish? They spent most of the cycle outside the top 20. They're obviously in the top 5 now. Can they keep going? Can they make a run at that number 1 class? Things would have to really fall in place, with particularly Georgia and obviously Texas landing everyone they would wish to land. But I'm curious to see, how close can they get to that number 1 spot? Can they cross that 300-point threshold on the rankings? I'm curious to see, how the transfer portal comes into play, not just at Texas, but, across the country. How does that affect different class sizes, who people are prioritizing, things like that. That's certainly obviously a new factor in this recruiting day and age. And then, just overall body of work of this class, landing these elite caliber guys, from Colin Simmons down to Brandon Baker, hitting on needs all across the board, whether, tight end with Jordan Washington, some really impressive defensive linemen, DeAndre Robinson, Melvin Hills, Alex January, just a really exciting class that Texas fans should be really happy about signing. And, looking at guys that I know Texas is really excited about. I think they're excited about everybody, but in particular, guys like Colin Simmons, an elite tier edge rusher, Ryan Wingo, a playmaker on the outside, Brandon Baker, a guy that can come and compete at that right tackle spot early. So overall, Texas fans should be thrilled with what they have coming into this 2024 class.
All right, thank you, Hank. And there's a couple more storylines of our own we want to get into. We will start with Colin Simmons, the 5-star edge out of Duncanville. He just finished his high school career with his 2nd straight state championship. So a highly achieved player. Smoke, what have you seen from him on his
When
tape?
you watch him, what you see is a guy that was incredible get off. His first step, most of the time, and I tell people, when you watch and you study pass rushers, 90% of a pass rusher is in the first step. If you can get that offensive lineman to get out of his stance, not get out of his stance, to get by him, you don't have to have any special move. What this guy has is incredible get off, wiggle, and his ability to bend and burst is top notch. He gives me a lot of Dallas Turner type feel, where this guy can affect the passer and you don't have to blitz and do all that other stuff with him. But he also has enough athleticism. If you back him off the ball, he can do some stuff in the short coverage area and play off the ball linebacker with some good instincts. But edge ability in terms of getting off, setting the edge, and pass rush ability, this is one of the elite rushers in this class.
I think when you look at just how physical he can be, and I mean his ability to take over games, and he's playing against big time talent each week. He's playing against a very tough schedule. He's playing against that Texas high school football that our guy Gabe Brooks is always raving about, and you see what he brings to the table from that defensive position. You see the physicality that he plays with kind of that nastiness, that just that attitude that he plays with. He plays through the whistle and a little bit after the whistle, but he's got a nice edge to his game. And I think when we've seen Texas, and I think this has followed Sark around a little bit when he was at Washington and at USC, that there was more finesse than there was power. But his defensive coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski, when he was at Washington as a DC, they were winning with the strength of a brutal defense. And I think that you're now seeing Texas's defenders are taking on an identity that Pete Kwiatkowski wants, and that's to be physical, that's to be aggressive, that's to be just these monsters up front. And you got to have that making that transition to the SEC. This is not the Big 12 anymore. You're going up to play big boy football, with all due respect to the Big 12, but you're going to have 12 to 15 opponents like that over the next couple of years that are going to be able to match you physicality, and they're going to be able to match you in the trenches. And I think that Colin Simmons is the type of player that what he's going to give that Texas defense is a huge boost for them as they make that move.
Yeah, the key to good defense is you take the air out of the pocket, that means get to the passer, take the air out of the coverage, which is by rushing the passer again, and play physical up front and stop it with 6 guys so you can keep 2 defenders high in terms of safeties.
Nastiness who plays after the whistle. I like that description. That's exactly what you want to see in an edge. Let's go to the other side of the line of scrimmage now and talk about Brandon Baker out of Mater Dei. Similar to Colin Simmons, someone who went to Mater Dei is going to face the elite competition through their high school career. 5-star offensive tackle. Huff, what do you know about him?
Well, you talk about those nasty edges that you're having to face and what you want to get. Well, now you're going to have to block those guys when you get to the SEC. You mentioned Dallas Turner, Smoke did, and the SEC is full of big, physical, athletic pass rushers. So how do you stunt that? How do you negate that? You get yourself a big, physical, athletic offensive tackle and a guy who is not done filling out. I mean, he's got the optimal frame as an offensive lineman. And again, we talked about the schedule that Colin Simmons played. I mean, Mater Dei won a national championship 2 years ago. They were a consensus national champion this year. When you look at all the different high school rankings, and this guy has been an anchor of a very talented offensive line for the Monarchs that helped Elijah Brown go 41-2 as a starter. And Brandon Baker, he grew up, his older brother went and played at Oregon, so he's been around the game. He's got this ability to make that transition to college football very quickly. He's got the frame that as he continues to get stronger, and as he continues to put on weight, he's going to be that much more effective, but he's already got the footwork, the natural flexibility. He's a beautiful knee bender, and he's already used to going against high-level pass rushers. It's going to be a big jump up now to the SEC, but not as big of a jump for a lot of offensive linemen. I think he's ready to be in there and be able to make an impact for Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian pretty quickly.
And the first thing when I cut on the film and I watch this guy, you see a big, nasty guy that plays to the echo of the whistle. I mean, he wants to put guys through the ground and bury him. And then the next thing that you see is when he comes off the ball, he's one of the guys that have good contact balance, and he has good bend and has the ability to create a new line of scrimmage by knocking guys back and finishing guys. And when you have big guys that have energy and effort level, that's one thing that you have to coach into guys. You're not coaching this into them. You might be coaching them out of getting some personal fouls just because he likes to bloody people's face and knock snot out of people. This guy right here, when you say, I want to run the ball, if he's lined up to the right, run it right. And keep running it right until somebody else sends 2 at him. But physical, big, nasty, athletic guy that only way you're going to win in the SEC with guys like this.
Our last player we want to get to is 4-star safety Kobe Black, who just announced his commitment last week. He said early playing time was a priority for him, and he sees a path to do so at Texas. Huff, what kind of impact do you think Kobe Black could make?
Well, I think he's got positional versatility. He likes to play corner. He could play safety. You know, he may be long-term as safety, but I think he's a guy that is going to have an opportunity to play early as a corner. Great hips. He can run. He can cover. He's got good ball skills. He closes really well. And, you know, you look at the defensive class that Texas had. And again, we think with Steve Sarkisian, you always think offense, but with Colin Simmons, with Kobe Black, with Xavier Filsaime, you've got some really good defensive backs that are going to help. Again, we keep harping on it, but the reality is Texas is making a move that's going to change their football recruiting in the future. And their ability to recruit high-level players is dependent on having that talent when you get to the SEC, not years after. We saw how Texas A&M kind of benefited from that when they made that move, and now Texas knows we've got to have speed in the secondary. We've got to have physical players in that secondary, and so with getting Kobe Black and his ability to run as a corner, getting Xavier as a safety, it's clear that Steve Sarkisian, as much as he's offensive-minded, he knows that he had to address some defensive needs and give Texas some playmakers in that secondary.
At the end of the day, when you're saying corners. In college football right now, you're actually playing with 4 corners in the back end. And then when you add your 5th nickel, which I think this guy can be to cover the slot, he's a nickel safety combination of guy with coverage skills as a safety, but physical enough as a tackler, but has the ball skills when you put it in the air. And when he gets the ball in his hands, he can do some incredible things in terms of return. Short area, quick, explosive hips, and coverage ability with great feet. Good get. You're getting 2 good safeties, like you said, with X. That from some years, you're not going to take those guys off the field because the college football is playing hurry-up football. When you're playing hurry-up football, you can't get guys in and out in sub-packages. This guy is a positionless guy that can stay on the field, tackle, and play against 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, or if you go 11 personnel with three receivers and 1 tight end, he can cover up those guys as well, too, with the athleticism.
Kobe Black plans to enroll early. Our Horns 24/7 site reporting that 16 of Texas's 22 commits will enroll early at 40 Acres in January. So some meaningful experience for the young guys there.